Anybody?
Okay.
Okay, good. We're recording.
Okay,
So
perfect.
we can get started now. I apologize for the lack of internet for the whole building.
I'm going to mute myself so we don't have background.
But we can do this without internet. Anyway, so are we ready to get started? Everyone ready? Okay, I'll just get started. So good afternoon, colleagues and committee. My presentation is called Cryptocurrency Chronicles, Innovations in Financial Integrity and Regulatory Compliance using Web 3.0 technology. This is a dissertation that I am studying under the guidance of Professor Vashaheli as my dissertation chair. My committee members are Dr. Isa, Dr. Applebaum, Dr. Kohan, with an honorary member, my grandfather, Dr. Kribanis. And the essay aims to see how new technologies, such as those introduced in Web 3.0, can be utilized by accountants to improve financial compliance and regulatory compliance. And the name was suggested by Dr. Kohan, who recommended I make it more concise by saying through Web 2.0 technologies. So,
Max, sorry to interrupt. Can you somehow share the slides because they are not visible on the screen? So, is there any way maybe?
Send them as email to yourself, I think, and then you can probably open them on your when you open Zoom, you can share the actual slides.
Oh, Professor Vashaheli has the slides. He will forward it while I'm presenting. Okay.
Okay.
To the committee. Forward the email to the committee, or do you want me to do it?
The other option, Max, would be if you basically zoom in on the screen. At that point, it would just look.
Oh,
it would be visible.
Connection. We. Okay, so I will forward right.
Oh, we lost him.
But how is it possible that on Thursday, Rutgers University has no internet?
Were we hacked or something? Because that could also be it.
Yeah, why would you not have internet at Rutgers?
And they didn't pay the bill.
Well, I mean, it's summertime, but you still have classes in the summer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And exams. This is exams period, right?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the summer semester is not over.
And there was no email about, because I still get Rutgers emails, believe it or not, but there was nothing about the internet being out.
I don't see any outage.
Nope, we didn't see anything.
Yes.
Huh.
Gotcha.
Sabotage.
Well, listen. When was it that we had this denial of service attack on Twitter? Okay, so we got something. Yeah, okay, so we got the slides. Good.
Okay, good, perfect.
Okay, fine. We can proceed. Now, if only Max reconnects. So essentially, we all only. You see, I always tell my students, number the slides and make those numbers visible. So sure enough, his slides have no numbers. So therefore, when he will be presenting, it will be impossible for him to say the slide number out loud.
Yeah.
Okay, we got the slides.
We got the slides, Max. How about Max? Just do us a favor, and whenever you're muted, by the way, just do us a favor later on, and whenever you're moving to the next slide, say it verbally.
Okay, so right now, currently, we are on the preface slide. Are we still recording?
Yes, we are recording.
Okay, so currently we're on the preface slide. So I'm going to cover right now what are crypto assets. So crypto assets are a type of assets that are secured through cryptographic technology, and they come in various forms, such as cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and in-game items that have their own financial implications because this is a form of concept that can be traded. Also, in this dissertation, I will be using the word POR a lot. POR is proof of reserves. This is a system that is utilized to prove that a person who is minting stable coins has this certain amount of stable coins needed in reserve. And Web 3.0 is the evolution of the internet, the current iteration. Web 1.0, some of you may remember, was a form of internet where the documents were.
What did you say? That say that you have the cryptocurrency reserve, or does it say that you have reserves that guarantee the?
You have the reserves that guarantee that they have the amount of assets that are being pegged by the stable coin.
That's
The Web 3.0 is the current iteration of the internet, where 1.0 was static web pages. Then Web 2.0, the internet became more dynamic. And through Web 3.0, it introduced technologies that augment our physical world, such as virtual reality and augmented reality. Also, the part of this dissertation is using Steam as a platform. Steam is a place where virtual goods can be exchanged. And the next slide I will show, which is the Steam slide. This slide discusses Steam, which is owned by Valve Corporation. It is the #1 PC gaming platform in the world, as well as a place where these virtual goods can be traded through the Steam community marketplace. And just to prove that this platform is worth studying, in May 2024, they had over 120 million active users. And at one time, they had 26.4 million users on at one point. So this is a currently relevant platform with a large amount of financial information and information security data. And during COVID-19, they gained 4.5 million users. So this may be a sign that as people are transitioning to working from home and to working either hybrid, that more people are getting exposed to this platform. And this is their logo right here. In the next slide, I have the name of the 3 chapters which will be covered in this dissertation. The first one is Proof of Reserves and Odd Attestation Framework. This is done with Dr. Applebaum and Dr. Bashahelli. The second one, oh, they're all saying one, but I'll fix that. The second one is Assessing the Risk, a comprehensive methodology for evaluating laundering likelihood in crypto assets. This is my project with also Dr. Applebaum and Dr. Bashahelli. And the third one is the relationship between cryptocurrency market performance and the metaverse, evidence from the Steam marketplace. This is my work with Dr. Issa. Now that I have shown you who I work with in relation to these essays, here is my graphical abstract that I want you all to be thinking about. And this is the big picture for my entire work and my grand plan. So it starts with cryptocurrency laundering occurring as a phenomenon. And people who are trading in cryptocurrencies, they might not be aware that cryptocurrency laundering can occur. Because of this, there is a likelihood that these cryptocurrencies can be laundered. And because there's a likelihood, we can therefore create some sort of score to measure how these cryptocurrencies can be laundered. And with this sort of score, we can potentially identify the level of laundering activity and for what assets. Along with this score, we can use exogenous variables such as those given to us through the Steam platform to see how the crypto markets work. And understanding how they work, along with a technology that this dissertation proposes, it's a framework to prove that you have on-chain and off-chain obligations for a firm, And the accounting information is therefore on-chain and off-chain. And we can use that to promote transparency and accountability, which is the whole main goal of the dissertation.
Max, a quick question.
Yes, Professor.
So conventionally, money laundering refers to converting the so-called dirty money into clean money.
Yes.
Now, but that actually becomes a problem if, say, the money, say the accounts and similar things are traceable. So many versions of cryptocurrency are either anonymous or pseudo-anonymous. Why? So what is there to launder? As far as I understand, all of that can be illegitimate, and there is no way to tell dirty from clean, at least in the realm of cryptocurrency. What is this cryptocurrency laundering problem?
So the cryptocurrency, excellent question, Professor. So the cryptocurrency laundering is an attempt to see how, through various variables, to see how likely a crypto asset is to be influenced by various weights. We develop a score, which is the second essay, to measure how likely it is to be laundered. And I introduce a table that shows what type of risk measures are there.
Again, I'm confused. Look, imagine that you have an organization that runs a number of different businesses. So, for example, they run racketeering, and where they actually basically get cash from their subjects, and they say run a restaurant. And in restaurant, they have an option, say, to pay for a lot of the expenses in cash. So, but then when say their patrons pay them, so that goes in that restaurant's bank account. So in this case, so you got racketeering money, which is dirty, and
Yes.
converted it into restaurant profits, which is a legitimate business and it is clean. Okay, so a lot of money enters into this clean money circulation system, and that's an option to launder the money. So what does it mean to launder cryptocurrency? If cryptocurrency is anonymous and it remains anonymous, so what does it mean that you launder it?
Well, people can, for example, in some countries, they can accept payments in forms of cryptocurrency. So let's say under the table, I pay you in Bitcoin, and we can underreport this. And because we underreport this, we can potentially avoid paying taxes. That is an example of how cryptocurrencies can be used. And to prove this, if I keep a private wallet, because if you're on a platform, some of these platforms, I believe they require a social security number. But if you're keeping a private paper wallet, there's almost no way of knowing, which makes it difficult for researchers to observe how these currencies are being utilized.
And Alex, to your
I'm
point,
not sure if it is legitimate to call it laundering. So you're talking about various, well, there are a lot of illegitimate activities in economies, right? But not everything is money laundering. I'm not sure, because money laundering is really converting one kind of money into another kind of money, where the first one is kind of illegitimate and the second one is legitimate. So I'm not sure what is legitimate in the cryptocurrency world.
Well, Alex, so in the cryptocurrency world, they're tumblers, I call them. So they use it to take, sources of, for example, there was a very famous case here in New York City where they tried to tumble the money, basically break it down to thousands of different wallets and transactions, try and lose the track of the original payment.
Denise,
they
just
call it tumbling.
FYI,
But this is tax. This is tax
It's been-
avoidance, right?
Well, it's a payment avoid. So they were trying to avoid. I mean, it was originally an illegitimate type of payment. It was illegal activities, it was a Ponzi scheme actually, and they were trying to hide the monies by using these tumblers that they're called in the dark web, where they try to basically hide the identities and break down the payments, and then they try to eventually put them back together again in a messy kind of way so no one can track it. And the FBI spends a lot of time trying to track these payments.
Denise, just FYI, yesterday when Max was presenting the third paper, the one about Steam, the Steam paper, we got a similar comment from Scott Summers.
Right.
So the comment that just Alex just made is not seems to be going to be an issue with other reviewers or editors. So my suggestion to Max is that he will need to include in his paper a good explanation that is a convincing explanation as to why he's calling it like cryptocurrency laundering, etc. Because that was a big issue in this was, and again, Max's explanation was not, apparently it did not satisfy Scott Summers as well. I'm assuming the same thing will be with the reviewers.
Yeah,
Right,
because the
Alex?
idea of laundering is basically taking illegitimate money and trying to make it
Exactly.
legitimate.
And that was his point, exactly like Alex.
They're not trying to do that, so they're trying to lose the track of the original payment, so they can eventually pull out the money, and at the end, after maybe like 1,000 iterations of different transactions.
Okay, but that has to be
It's a different
explained.
kind of terminology. It's called tumbling.
Okay, then use that word. Don't call it cryptocurrency laundering, call it tumbling or something else.
Okay.
In this case, unless it was used in the literature somewhere that is called cryptocurrency laundering, if you are borrowing the term, I suggest you use a different term.
Right.
Okay. I borrowed this term from the traditional laundering with classical.
It's not the same. It doesn't work the same way. I agree with Alex and Scott, to be honest with you. So just use the word tumbling, like Denise is saying. I think that would be a different thing. You can explain it, but you have to define it first in the paper. Define what tumbling is. And
again,
then,
it may be some other kinds of illegitimate
term,
activities.
I mean, there's a known technique in the cryptocurrency space where they're taking this money, the funding that came illegitimately for whatever reason, a crime or whatever, and they're trying to hide it by obfuscating the origin of the funds by breaking it down to millions of transactions, millions of wallets, and then trying to retumble it and bring it back again.
But you know, as I said, so many cryptocurrency designs tried to achieve this objective of untraceability.
Right, exactly.
So, and if you really have an untraceable thing, and you have those wallets that cannot be convincingly connected to any physical identity, then why do you have to bother at all? Because it's already untraceable.
Well, not necessarily. So most exchanges now have to divulge the identities of any U.S.-based wallet holders, for example. So that's the other issue at play. That's why they're trying to break it down to very small, minuscule portions, unidentified wallets from other countries, what have you. It's a very complicated matter, and
Okay.
the exchanges.
Yes, but in this case, okay, so you're talking about constraints introduced by exchanges,
Right.
while cryptocurrency itself may not require anything like that, right?
Right.
So it's a somewhat disconnected thing because you know, in a way, the reliance on exchanges contradicts the basic design philosophy, say, of Bitcoin.
I agree.
So Bitcoin was conceptually designed as a decentralized cryptocurrency. So exchanges by design are centralized.
Exactly.
So it's, I mean, there are inherent contradictions here. It's like, you know, central bank digital currency from, you know, it's a very popular topic. A lot of people studied it. Actually, if you talk to those early proponents of Bitcoin, to them it will be a misnomer, because the idea, so any central bank virtual currency will necessarily be inflationary.
Right.
So, and Bitcoin was designed as a deflationary.
I agree
Yeah.
with you, but that's the reality right now. That's the only way. I mean, that's largely how it's existing right now. Is it's on these platforms, these exchanges that, like, you're correct, they're centralized, and the government has more control, and the regulations have more say, and it sort of defies the original philosophy of the whole thing. So, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this all has to be made very clear. So what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with the intrinsic properties of cryptocurrencies or you're dealing with a superstructure built on top of it.
Exactly. Because you're right, you're correct, Alex. If it was strictly the pure philosophy, the pure iteration, this would not be necessary.
Okay, Max, please continue.
Oh, so committee, we actually now have internet in the building, so we are switched to sharing the screen.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, excellent. So we have it now. Yep.
How long do you have internet?
Well, we have the phone running as a backup.
Okay, so we're good, Max.
No.
Yeah, you want to turn your phone off so you don't get an echo.
Okay. Use the audio from this computer, please.
Say
By the
something
way,
else.
Currently in use.
Microphone's okay, it's a speaker.
can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, mute your phone. Or maybe you just can quit it, depending on who the host.
You can't put it in the.
I think if he quits, you become the host, Alex.
Depends on the setting, no? I was
Because
the
you'll
first.
be, yes, you were the first to join.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Max, switch the display option. You know, you went, yeah. Okay, yes, good. Perfect.
Beautiful.
Duplicate.
Yeah. Is this better?
Yes,
Yes, very clear.
We're still okay, good. Can you see me on camera?
yes, yes,
Okay, I think it says we're recording.
yes, we're recording.
1 second, let me mute my grandfather here.
No, you are the host. There.
Oh, oh,
Mute there.
okay.
1 second.
Okay, that should have fixed it. Okay, so I will continue now.
Sure.
So I believe I'm done with this slide. I'm going to go to the next one.
Okay.
So the first essay is called Proof of Reserves and Audit Attestation Framework. Now, what might be the motivations for why I wanted to look at this specific topic? It got started because Dr. Applebaum introduced the topic to me when we had a talk after a conference meeting. And from then on, it led me down the rabbit hole where I learned that, well, for one, businesses use crypto, but because they use crypto, the stakeholders might not fully understand the implications of these businesses that are using crypto. And because there is now a new system, like, for example, with stable coins that we have discussed earlier, it leads to the question to how accountants can adapt to these non-traditional forms of debits. So upon a literature review of this topic, we have found that there is a difference between stable coins and unstable coins. A stable coin is stable because it is pegged by a physical, it doesn't have to be a physical asset, it's pegged by another asset. because stable coins can be pegged by a cryptocurrency. That's why I said an asset, not a physical asset. It could also be pegged by gold or other cryptocurrencies, US dollars, etc. However, unstable coins are unstable because they are not pegged by any asset. So what drives their value is the investor's belief that they can either utilize this for an exchange of goods and services, or that their investment will grow and they can make a profit from this. Some academics may argue that this essentially leads to a Ponzi scheme, where you hope to put in less than the next person in front of you in order to make more. So because there is an existence of stable coins, there needs to be a way to prove that these stable coins are stable. And the way this is done is through proof of reserves. However, because we are doing this now, and this is a new thing, there is lack of audit attestation services. Some companies might only provide some opinions, but not actual audit attestation. And the reason why this is necessary is because previously, for example, FTX, and Three Arrows Capital have crashed. They were using cryptocurrencies, but they did not properly prove the reserves, and they were essentially mismanaging their assets. So because of this inherent problem, auditors do not want to take upon the risk of providing a audit attestation. And because of that, it is because they don't have a technology to put or framework to put their belief in. And the only current way this is done is through assurance opinions and through periodic audits, which is not a contemporary solution, as according to the contributions of Vashaheli, for example, with continuous audit. So the methodology for this specific chapter is we created a way of understanding that there's a difference between what goes on the blockchain and off the blockchain. So a blockchain is simply a chain of hashed codes that go from the moment they're minted to the latest individual. And there is financial information along this chain. This is on the blockchain. However, there is financial information that is off the blockchain. So a company that mints these blockchains, for example, has to pay their electricity bill. And they might not be doing this using cryptocurrencies. And this might not be listed on their blockchain. So in order to create a framework to assist auditors in providing an attestation, we have first of all created a taxonomy to taxonomize different types of crypto assets and their properties. And we introduced the double helix framework, which I will cover in the next slide. And we created in the appendix a template that these auditors might use that is in compliance with the double helix framework. This is the most important slide of the entire chapter. So the way this works is, and I know this might look confusing at first, but I will explain. So figure 4 shows the double helix off-chain transactions. This would be a transaction, for example, that involves pay your electricity bill as a company. So if they are paying with cash, this would still affect the total amount in reserves that they have, which would affect the on-chain information. And because it affects the on-chain information, the accounting information should be updated. as well as, because it's an off-chain transaction, the accounting information is still updated off the chain and their ledger gets updated, which is some sort of double entry system for the blockchain and the accounting information. But I don't think double entry is a good word to use because it might confuse some people with debits and credits. But this is a cryptocurrency double entry that we introduce to this model.
Max, if a company is paying for electricity off-chain,
Off-chain.
yeah, okay, so let's say their cash on hand decreases.
Yes.
Why do they have to update something on the chain?
Because if you are trying to get transparency into what the company is doing as an investor into these crypto assets, you would want a way to continuously be able to audit the company. This is a method of doing so.
Wait a second. So essentially what you're saying, you're going to require a company essentially to post a transaction on the chain showing the decrease of cash on hand.
Yes, so there is a parallel chain to the blockchain.
And why would any company want to do that? Why? Because, you know, I assume that you are talking about a public permissionless chain, blockchain, right? So you're not talking about a private permissioned blockchain.
Yes.
Then, I mean, you actually make the company show on the public chain everything that affects the reserves, right? So for everybody to see.
Yes, Professor. This is an attempt to improve the transparency of the companies.
That won't work, Max.
Well, but you know that our public reporting scheme in this country is a trade-off between, you know, giving some information to investors and still allowing a lot of confidential activities to the companies. So if you require absolute transparency, I don't think we'll have too many public companies left. It's going to be a totally different regulatory regime.
Alex, we're talking about companies that do the business of cryptocurrencies here. We're not talking about, like, for example, exchanges.
Yes, cryptocurrency.
We're not talking about a regular publicly traded company. And the issue with, like, for example, FTX is that they were dipping into reserves and it wasn't published anywhere on a chain, even though they were using the reserves that supposedly they had on hand to maintain their holdings.
So then essentially this
of FT tokens.
has to be spelled out, because Max, your presentation makes an impression that this is what you recommend to do for any company that engages in any kind of cryptocurrency usage.
Well, it's for the people that have to prove the reserves, which would be the exchanges.
So this has to be actually spelled out in your upfront in your presentation and in the paper.
Okay, I noted that. I will need to update this slide. However, this story continues.
Okay.
So there's an example of an on-chain transaction, which would involve the blockchain. So if somebody, for example, uses the blockchain, this would still affect the blockchain. And this information can still be reported, because if they're taking a percentage out of the transaction, this would update their accounting information. So right here, I don't know if you can see that. I'll move this first temporarily. So right here is an idealized representation of what the framework might look like. So you have your on-chain strand. This is your blockchain with the information from the blockchain. And there is off-chain information as well. And this is symbolically showing that you can have for every transaction that occurs, there is a distance of separation for how far apart these transactions are. So for example, a on-chain transaction would be more closely related than, for example, paying their utility bills through accounting information. So this is a symbolic way of showing this distribution. In an idealized environment, it does not actually in reality look like this, because you can have multiple transactions happening that would branch off here or here. So this is more of a beautified model just to show how to visualize the information. Does anybody have any questions about this? Because I know this is the most confusing slide in the entire dissertation.
I'm good.
Okay, so I will continue to the other side. So who cares about this? So blockchains can be private and they can be public. And with the proliferation of smart contracts, accountants can utilize this sort of framework within their smart contracts, for example, and program in when something happens, then this part of the contract gets executed. We need to develop that part of the paper more. Another thing that can happen is that this sort of structure is for the exchanges. So it can be made public, however, they can also be made internally.
Max, so your proposal, is it for blockchain a public or private blockchain?
Well, overall, it's for public, the exchanges.
No, I mean the solution that you had, the double helix. So this is going to be a public blockchain,
Yes,
right?
it's a public solution, yes.
Then why are you talking here about the private blockchain?
Because if a company wishes to use this privately for internal purposes, they can. They can adapt it privately, but this is meant for and designed for public use.
Okay. Go ahead, proceed.
And the reason why we might want to do this, because now if a auditor is more willing to and has a way of seeing the transparency, this would help investors make more confident decisions, knowing that there's some level of transparency and the events of FTX and Three Arrows Capital would not repeat again due to the inherent transparency provided by the framework. So the findings are that proof of reserves overall as a system do guarantee that businesses have enough assets in reserve under the condition that we can see the financial information to back it up. And with a framework such as this, you can have an armchair auditor look at the blockchain, or you can have a professional auditor look at the double helix framework and verify that this is what they're doing and they're not mismanaging their records. Another side thing that we might get rid of in the paper is the idea of tokenizing the off-chain transactions in XBRL format for descriptive purposes. But this is something that we would have to discuss doing because it's an iffy part of the dissertation.
No, Max, even in the slide.
Yeah, just to give you some background, so currently the exchanges, those that claim that they have proof of reserves, they can actually go at a certain date, a time of date that's provided by the audit firm, and guarantee or verify according to the reserves that they claim they have, what's publicly is available in terms of assets. But it's limited in time. So, for example, on Coinbase, I think it's dated like last November, a certain date and time. And really, was more or less the auditor was reviewing and agreeing to the process and procedures that the exchange is undertaking to verify, the reserves. So this is publicly available information to some degree.
Okay.
Even if you cite before, the problems with your words. I am going to just, after edit your slides for you.
Okay. Understood.
It doesn't guarantee, it supports.
Okay.
Guarantee is very strong word. And before, the way you word private blockchain there, it kind of misleading in the story. So I'll just help you with the wording. I don't have any objection. Just go ahead.
I think also I'm gonna remove this because I feel like that's kind of redundant.
Yes. That was one of my habits.
And
Yeah,
Max,
yes.
just one quick thing regarding the XBRL.
Yeah.
You need to be careful about that part. If you believe that or that it will really add value to your framework, add it. Otherwise, it will simply add complexity to your paper. In that, when you send it out for reviewer, you're just opening the door for a whole new set of questions. Right? So when you send it out, you already submitted it for publication, right?
Yes.
So,
So
but later,
currently this is under review at the British Accounting Review. It's been under review for, at this point, almost a year.
Yeah,
does that paper have anything to do with XBRL?
Honestly, I see your point. I don't think XBRL is within scope of this paper, and that would just be an additional paper at that point. That would make it too long.
That's my point, and I learned that a long time ago from Alex, and that don't add anything. So, for example, if you talk about blockchain, you have to explain why blockchain and not another thing. So this is one of the main things that you have to explain is why this specific format, why XBRL, etc. And unless you can show that XBRL actually adds value to your specifically to your framework, then don't add it. And I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of papers that talk already about the benefits of XBRL. You want to show that there is a benefit to specifically your framework. If it's not specific to your framework, don't add it. That's my suggestion. I don't know if the committee agrees with that, but that's my suggestion.
I think it's a good point, because otherwise it opens up a whole different argument and discussion.
Okay.
But I think what is important here is you really have to clarify what these requirements, essentially blockchain requirements that you tokenize and off-chain transactions and post them on blockchain, whether it's XBRL or anything else, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But how does it simplify, say, the problem of auditing? Because you don't have to impose those requirements. You can just say, okay, there will be an auditor. You have to hire an auditor who will every week do the audit of your reserves and makes a public posting that, okay, the reserves are fine or whatever, something like that. Because, conceivably, an auditor should be able to audit anything that a company does, because whether it goes on blockchain or on the internal system, if the company is auditable, it means that it is required to maintain proper records in whatever format, right? And you can always have an auditor. So what does this framework achieve? So supposedly, it should make the problem of auditing such a company significantly easier. Okay, because there are two different things here. So one is disclosure, that it is disclosed that the company has sufficient reserves, right? And you can disclose in many different ways, so it doesn't have to be a blockchain. And the other one is the problem of auditing such a company, right? Because so what is specifically achieved by relying on this blockchain technology, which is a distributed involatile record of certain things, right?
Yes.
So you have to argue that what are you actually buying here with this proposal?
Okay. Understood. Shall I proceed?
Sure.
I have a hard stop at 5:45. So let's see if we can cover the 3 essays at least.
Okay, so I'm gonna hurry up.
And around 5:30, we need to stop and talk among us in the committee.
Okay, understood. So the next essay is called Assessing the Risk and Comprehensive Methodology for Evaluating Laundering Likelihood in Crypto Assets. So the idea behind this specific essay is that crypto assets may be gained illegitimately. And because that they can be gained illegitimately, it might mean that a counterparty might be trading assets that they are not aware are gained illegitimately. And if companies are involved in this, if they are involved in some sort of laundering scheme, or now we're using the term tumbling scheme, this would affect their reputation. So the review for this chapter is in accordance to current laundering score literature, which is made for traditional currencies. However, upon a literature review, there has been no cryptocurrency specific laundering score. So in order to find how to create one, there has been a literature review search on cryptocurrencies and their anti-money laundering properties.
Can you just explain me what is a laundering score?
So a laundering score is the traditional laundering scores are scores meant to track how a traditional currency like the US dollar, how likely it is to be laundered.
Meaning that a particular transaction is.
Not a particular transaction, it's more of a economics like score.
Meaning like, obviously there is laundering and there is regular transaction. Would that give you a ratio between how many are laundered, how many are not? I don't understand.
A laundering score for what entity? So what is the entity that
For a
you're assigning a laundering score to?
For a currency.
To a currency, you're assigning a laundering score to a currency, not to a particular corporate entity or anything like.
Yes. So I will get into why in the next slide.
Okay.
So according to exceptional exceptions by Dr. Issa, they have in his work, he created a weighted risk score but in my essay, I took a similar approach, creating a weighted risk score for how likely, what is the risk that a blockchain is to be laundered. And using this score, this can help with the assessment of frauds. So for example, how do we know which has more likely to be laundered, Bitcoin or Ethereum? And it's not easy to know this exactly unless we consider the variables between the two cryptocurrencies and evaluate them.
Max,
Yes, Professor.
so you just need to be very clear in your paper, and you have to be careful about using, about basically distinguishing between when you talk about for fraud or for laundering or tumbling or like cryptocurrency tumbling, okay? Because sometimes you talk about fraud, sometimes about money laundering. Those are two different problems.
Yes.
So you have to be careful about that. So have the paper more specific. Are you targeting fraud or are you targeting money tumbling? That I mean, cryptocurrency tumbling. That would actually should be the core, basically, or the objective of the paper.
Okay. So in this case, I actually do believe this would be a fraud likelihood then, instead of a laundering. It would be a fraud likelihood score because the risks that I propose would, some of them have nothing to do with laundering now that I think about it. So I think you're right. Fraud would be a better term to use for this chapter.
Okay.
So weighted sum models have been utilized previously in literature to solve for an issue like this. And have created this laundering likelihood model, where L is the laundering likelihood score, which we should probably change the name of. N would be the risk indicators, with RI being the risk indicator. And then you have the weight. So to get the weights of the risk indicators, what was proposed in the paper was taking the betas from the regression between the variables. And essentially, this is my attempt at replicating exceptional exceptions, but with cryptocurrencies. Now, to
You know, Max, I'm not even sure that, building on what Hussein said, I'm not even sure that it's really about even fraud. So, for example, it has been widely reported, so there have been places on the internet, like the infamous Silk Road and things like that, where people would say procure narcotics.
yes.
And pay for them using cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Is that covered by your risk factors, this kind of activity?
Yeah, so it does include that.
But that's not fraud. This is just illegal, underground economy. So it's just, so you're really talking about this possibility of utilizing cryptocurrencies in various kinds of illegal activities, right?
Yes.
So even fraud is too narrow, because that thing is not fraud.
Okay. So what term should I be using? Is there like any term that you guys comes to mind?
Well, any transaction where you don't want the true owner of the transactor to be found, right? So
Do you want to call it, maybe you can call it something like problematic or suspicious?
yeah,
Because
problematic.
in this case, it's more broad, because you can't even
Right.
call it like illegal. Although like fraud, we know that fraud and these kind of transactions are illegal, but as soon as you talk about legality, at that point you will have different countries, different laws, different etc. So you don't want to go down that road. You can call it suspicious in this case.
But I don't think you can avoid it, because so for example, hard drugs are illegal in the United States, right? If you
Right.
go to the Netherlands, so the situation will be different, right?
Right.
So it does, I mean, it's unavoidable. I mean, we have always we have a certain legal framework in place, and it is really about that. Look, let me give you an example. So it's widely known that the biggest cryptocurrency exchanges were all in Asia, right? And a lot of boom in Bitcoin was particularly due to the activities of certain Chinese entrepreneurs who were trying to get significant sums of money out of the country. That greatly limits the legal options for doing so, right? So certain activities that would be perfectly legal in different jurisdictions, like the United States, right, were illegal in China. And people actually were driving up the price of Bitcoin because that was for them the primary option how to get important resources out of the country. So I mean, those things would be legal in the United States. They were illegal in China.
I did not consider the legality aspect, because like you're correct. So the most widely traded commodity on the dark web would be literature. So literature that's legal in here might not be legal somewhere else, just like your drug example. And I did not think about this.
Okay.
Maybe in this case, part of the weights. So this can actually be, and again, you have to think about it even further. But a suggestion would be kind of like in the weight. The weight would be country specific or something like that. That, for example, let's say that if something is legal here but illegal somewhere else, there should be some kind of part of the weights of the W's would be like, for example, a 0 or something like that. That would kind of balance it out.
Okay, that's a good point. I need to introduce that to the paper. So the issue with this actual project is that the numbers are subject to the specific asset. And when trying to find, it depends on where you are, like we've discussed already. So it depends on the location and in a lot of conditions. So as I've said earlier, one way of finding the weight was doing regressions and trying to use the betas as the weights. So this is the graphical abstract of capturing laundering likelihood, like how it's intended to be utilized. So we create a various RI indices. We determine the weights, we calculate a score, then we create a model, and through machine learning, we can find more risks and then create essentially a research cycle to find different risks. Who would care about a project like this?
It's obvious.
Okay, so I'll just skip this slide. So the findings is that we can analyze transaction patterns for suspicious activities and use that as well to try to further understand the risks. And I'm going to continue for the sake of time. So the third essay is the relationship.
Just explain again this concept of a laundering index, meaning I have no doubts with the discussion here or problems about illegality is a relative thing to a country, relative thing to who is interpreting. I have no problem with that. But what are we measuring here? That's what I'm a little bit confused.
Well, what needs to be measured is the different variables for a crypto asset. For example, Bitcoin, you might have transactions in Asia, Japan, and in Japan, you might have some sort of seasonal variables as well. And all those variables would create an index that we can observe. It's kind of inspired by with the exercise you made us do for exogenous variables, where we created different variables. So I wanted to do something similar, but for risks for crypto.
What are you going to do? A laundering index for the entire Bitcoin? A laundering index for a sector? What is this index going to be?
The index is meant for the laundering score, and it's dependent on the Bitcoin. So each Bitcoin should have its own laundering score.
Not Bitcoin, cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency, my apologies, cryptocurrencies. Every cryptocurrency should have its own laundering score. So, for example, Ethereum, for example, might have more risks due to certain variables. Bitcoin might have less risk due to certain variables. I don't know exactly. I haven't done intelligent research on that.
In theory, if you knew the answer, you'd say there are 8 laundered transactions out of 100, so your index is 92 or 8%. Is that what you're
Precisely for, yeah.
I think you need to think about this.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that some people are interested in laundering. So obviously there is interest. I think some kind of measuring of laundering is very important for different constituencies. However, kind of figuring out that 73% of Bitcoin is non-laundered, and 20 cents, meaning comparing entire aggregate coins, that doesn't add any value to anyone. Just say to some government that they might forbid their currency. Alex, what do you think that would be the value of having a generic index for the entire currency?
Well, I'm not sure it is even possible because,
Yeah.
as I said, it would differ by jurisdiction.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but you know, there are two different things here. So there are certain say things that make say enforcing legality difficult, which are due to say design features of a cryptocurrency. So a particular cryptocurrency is designed in a certain way, and because of that, I mean, certain things can be either easier or more difficult. This is on the technical side of things. But also on the behavioral side of things, there may be different usage patterns. So you may have more illegal activity in a particular cryptocurrency compared to another one, not because of any specific design weaknesses of that cryptocurrency, but because it is more popular for whatever reason, so more people use it, things like that. And I don't really know if you can distinguish between the two, because empirically, if you look at, say, certain adverse events, for example, occurrence of illegal transactions in a particular cryptocurrency, I think it will depend on both. So I don't know if it is even possible to disentangle those technical and behavioral things.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. So, but I think it's an interesting aspect of this.
I mean, I also would add the whole issue of trying to determine the weights of all the risk factors is also it's a big challenge, and that's something that's acknowledged. There could be empirical analysis, expert judgment, or Bayesian updating. And I know you talk about using the Sainz formula, the betas of the exceptional exceptions, but you have to support that discussion, which I didn't see in the paper really.
And another thing, at the end, you also like with exceptions, it was transaction based. So each transaction would have the score. So here it has to be also clarified what would have eventually a score. Alex, do you think that if instead of focusing or instead of talking about a cryptocurrency, talking about an exchange, would that be easier? Because that usually is also, I mean, it is still traded across multiple countries.
Yeah, that might
But
be helpful.
that might be actually helpful for Max.
Right.
This is the reason why I asked about what entity a score is calculated for.
Right.
And it was quite surprising that you try to do it for the whole, say, framework.
That's a great idea, actually. It's saying like the exchange is very precise.
Exactly. And it has certain features.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you, and I think it would flow better for the dissertation because the previous chapter is also on exchanges.
Exactly.
And the third chapter is also on exchanges.
Perfect.
Exactly.
And that would narrow down a lot of the issues with this chapter here.
Okay, I will definitely work on that. That's a very good comment. Thank you for that one. So I'm going to go to the third chapter, which I presented yesterday.
And you did a good job at presenting it.
Thank you, Dr. Issa. I appreciate it. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to cover what the metaverse is unless you want me to.
No, I think you should cover it.
Okay. So
What is the metaverse? The metaverse is a collective space where the different levels of reality converge. So that's, for example, why Meta, the company, changed their name from Facebook to Meta, because they want to be part of the metaverse. So the metaverse has, due to the new technologies such as virtual reality, augmented reality,
they allow now for our real world to be augmented and the digital world to be utilized more easily. And because of this scenario where you have all of these new technologies and all these different levels of reality, there's situations where there are economic implications for inside the metaverse. So, for example, the businesses, some of which have moved purely online, can conduct business in the metaverse, and some already do. For example, I believe Tesla does. And this has been supported by literature from e-commerce and electronic storefronts. However, because this is now a more or less decentralized global system, this brings upon regulatory challenges. And I believe every crime that occurs within the metaverse is technically wire fraud in the US, which is a felony, because you're utilizing the internet to commit a crime. Now, the problem here is that you now have cryptocurrency markets, which have existed since 2012, and you have the metaverse. The cryptocurrencies are the currency of the metaverse, more or less, because they are both decentralized. Most popular being BTC, Bitcoin. So according to the literature, the metaverse as a concept with people working remotely has cybersecurity implications, and that having the metaverse has also socioeconomic implications that have been studied by Edward Castronova in the 2000s. But because as more people are transitioning to hybrid and online approaches and businesses investing into the metaverse, there is a need for expanding our accounting practices to these virtual environments that consider the specific variables of these virtual environments, which are different than our today's physical financial environments. So what this paper did was it tried to look at the crypto market. Specifically, it represented the crypto market with the most popular cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. And it took the metaverse marketplaces, which are marketplaces where these goods and services are exchanged. And it took Steam, which is the #1, and it exemplified that as a metaverse marketplace. So for the purposes of the paper, when I refer to crypto markets, I'm utilizing Steam as a proxy. And when I'm reverting to metaverse marketplace, utilizing Bitcoin as a proxy. When I'm referring to metaverse marketplaces, I'm referring to Steam. A little bit about Steam is there's a 5% fee charged by the platform for every transaction. And this is also a way to prevent people from wash trading. There's also a developer fee.
Prevent people.
Wash trading. I will get into this in a second.
I know.
So in total, there's the developers who develop this virtual asset that is being sold on the marketplace. For example, it could be a virtual frying pan that somebody designed, and they're selling it on the virtual marketplace. So there's a 10% fee for the developers of the asset, and a 5% fee from the platform Steam, which is owned by Valve Corporation. So an example for how often this marketplace is utilized is when Counter-Strike 2, it's a popular game, it increased the trade volumes with 5.4 million daily trades on a day. So it is definitely a place with significant activity that is worth exploring. And in accounting literature, this has not been explored. So this led us to two hypotheses about the relationship between these cryptocurrencies and the metaverse marketplaces. our first hypothesis is that the total sales on Steam is associated with Bitcoin trade volume. The reason for that, our belief in that, is because Steam is a luxury service. So people would be spending money on Steam after they've already, we assume people would be spending money on Steam after they paid for their food, their rent, etc. And a lot of companies also get paid. Well, some companies pay their employees in Bitcoin. That's also an option now. And some countries like El Salvador, it's accepted as a fiat currency where people can get paid in it as well. So the second hypothesis being that the average listing price on Steam is positively associated with Bitcoin price. Our reasoning for this, oh, I took that out for time. Our reasoning for this is because if people are listing items on Steam, and due to the rapid dissemination of information within the metaverse, the factors driving the costs should be similar as to the Bitcoin, because you can utilize Bitcoin through Steam. Because you can attach your PayPal account and pay with Bitcoin, your Bitcoin wallet. Now, in order to explore these hypotheses, what was done was the Steam marketplace was web scraped. So we web scraped the Steam platform, and we got the transaction data, and as well as Yahoo Finance for Bitcoin data. And then these data were uploaded to Tableau, and we ran various tests.
Who is we?
Well, I ran various tests. I'm just used to using AAA talk instead of dissertation talk.
It's called the royal we.
The royal we, yes. So the
Pontifical we.
pontifical, that's what the journals say. Do not use pontifical we. So this is an example of a Steam listing that was web scraped and is included in our data. So this is a double auction. Currently, there are no buyers. There's no listings active. There's no people selling it. However, there are 2,985 buy requests at $1,142 or lower, which is a significant amount of money. So when you take 15% of this amount, you'll see how much profit people will make. So this is a virtual frying pan created by the developer of PUBG Battlegrounds. So that means the developers that sell this virtual frying pan will make 10%, and Valve will make 5% because this listing is on their platform. And people who buy this can use this item in-game, or they can display it on their profile as a pseudo NFT. This sort of thing existed before NFTs actually existed. Because
I can later on sell it as well.
yes, and they can hold on to it and sell it as well. Dr. Issa probably has his own virtual frying pans, right, Dr. Issa?
Not that one specifically, but I do have skills and stuff like that.
Okay, so Dr. Issa is already invested in the Steam platform.
Ask him what his wife thought.
What does your wife think of your investments in Steam?
She believes what Alex said one time is absolutely true, that when the difference between boys and men is that men's toys are more expensive. So she agrees with that 100%.
And the literature agrees with that 100% as well. So this is an example this is an example of how the data looks like that we web scrape. So we have a timeline. So I believe the Steam Community Marketplace platform opened up 2012. I don't remember the exact year, but at that point when it opened up, Steam was already a mature market, whereas Bitcoin was just introduced. So this is, you can see here the price changes in the thousands of dollars for one item. And it seems to me that Steam is also volatile, just like Bitcoin is. So we ran a couple of results, and here are the results. So this is done on a normalized scale, where the top portion here is the full timeline from 2024 to 2012 as at our cutoff date. And then here, this portion is the top part blown up after COVID-19, starting 2019. So as you can see here, they do not appear as correlated until COVID happens, where visually after COVID happens, there seems to be that your Bitcoin is a leading indicator for what happens in the metaverse. And we attribute that they were not as, where that Bitcoin was more or less flat was due to the learning effect. But because of the differences in the market capacities, we also ran, well, I ran this test on a logarithmic scale. So this is the results for the test on a logarithmic scale, and I believe that the results support the hypotheses that there is a correlation. In addition to tracking the quantity sold, so we took the trade volume on a logarithmic scale. And now this resulted in some spikes on Steam, the Steam timeline, and these outlier events were analyzed and they correlate to real world events that can explain this, such as Steam summer sales. To track the listing prices, I wanted to see how they changed throughout the year. So as you can see, they tend to go up in around April for Bitcoin, because every 4 years around April, the Bitcoin doubles. So that creates a time of financial activity because it becomes more difficult to mine the Bitcoin.
Why is it more difficult to mine the Bitcoin?
Because it doubles the difficulty, I believe, every 4 years. It's called Bitcoin halving, I think. And that happens around April, and it will happen April 2024, I think.
It happened in April 2020.
Oh, it happened. It already passed. Yes.
Yes, a couple of months ago.
So I think that was actually then included here in our data set. So you can also see that Steam, the darker line here, goes up because the Steam summer sale is the largest event on Steam that happens annually with the most amount of financial activity. So the Steam summer sale happens sometime in June. So people make the purchases from the developers, and then the investors try to sell it off throughout the summer, which causes this increase, and then it drops back down to normal. I also wanted to see how throughout the days of the month, how these transactions change. So the listing prices tend to go up towards the end of the month because a lot of people get paid at the end of the month. And as you can see, the prices here go up more or less about how people get paid bi-weekly as well. So we can see that towards the end of the month, people have paid off their fixed expenses such as their rent, and they are more willing to invest into these luxury goods such as Steam and Bitcoin. Or they could be getting paid and converting their currency into Bitcoin or into these virtual assets. So the findings from this research is that crypto is a leading indicator for the metaverse marketplaces. And also we accept the hypotheses that the values of cryptocurrencies fluctuate with the listings. And another finding that was interesting was that the pandemic, specifically COVID-19, which caused a lot of people to sit at home, had an increase on the metaverse, which supports the literature that shows that more people have been working from home. So who would care about this specific project? Well, companies might care because companies that wish to develop products on the Steam marketplace would want to understand what would be the best time to introduce these new products, how these sales affect these products, since Bitcoin is a leading indicator, what is the current price of seeing the current activity levels of Bitcoin would help you make an optimal investment strategy of when to create your virtual asset or to list it if you're an investor. And they would also help with policymakers. So if you're trying to regulate these activities, understanding how they are correlated would help with the risk scores. So in conclusion, this dissertation is about how we can achieve greater financial integrity through Web 3.0 technologies. Do we have any questions?
We already asked some questions.
Yeah. In that case, I will exit the room
Take care.
And stop recording.
and I will stop
I
recording.
just want to see if they can hear me.
We can hear you well.
Yeah, we can hear you.
How do you stop it?
Can you see me too if I am here in the deck?
We were able to see you and hear you when you were seated in your on your
Yeah.
table.
I couldn't hear you very
We
well.
put the phone next to Dr. Vasarhelyi.
So
We have to wait till,
Max, I think you need to stop recording it from your phone if I'm not mistaken.
right.
Yeah, stop recording it.